Mm hmm Good morning, friends. Looks like we're live, and today should be a fun exercise. What we're going to do is basically look at the next shot that we're working on. This is just the sketch from the storyboard, and the idea is to think strategically about how we can approach this shot to get the animation that we need in the most effective way. So let's jump back to the show here in the edit and kind of see that we got through this one sequence a few days ago. Did this establishing shot. So this is really the last sequence that needs to be animated in the show. This is episode 2 of Salt and Light. And so really this is what we have so far. And then Golek sort of gets interrupted. I'll put this on the larger screen so you guys can see a little better what's going on. Boop. Alright, so we have this establishing shot. And Golek's talking to the crowd. And then something happens that makes him kind of frown a bit. Okay? Well, that's because the citizens who were invited to the wedding are basically the landowners, the more affluent members of the culture. An opportunity for them to sort of make their voices heard, you might say. And so they're, hey Golek, what about these taxes that the king's been imposing, kind of thing. So that's in a sense a little bit of a distraction from the main narrative, both for us as the storytellers and for our audience, and it's also obviously an interruption for Golek, but it is an important backdrop to the socio-political climate of the situation that the people are all in. So with that said, we have this shot, okay, and so as I said, what we're going to do is just think strategically about what we're trying to do here. Number one, it makes a lot, and by the way, I'm not going to get into the way we're going to go ahead and render the background crowd around these guys in order to create a complete shot. The goal here is to deal with the characters. So the two guys that are rendered in detail, you know, what are they going to do? And the first thing I'm seeing as I'm looking at it, and I'm just kind of sketching over the storyboard image and while I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to do here? And the first thing I'm seeing really, which is pretty much going to define the workflow today, is that these two guys should really be in two separate levels. And the reason for that is that actually if we draw these two guys as static images, then in both cases we'll be able to use the plastic tool to just move their arms, because basically the one guy's kind of doing the, hey, what about this, and the other guy's going, yeah, you guys can't really see it because the webcam's not wide enough, but you can kind of see what's going to happen. His arms are going up and down, and he's kind of doing a little bit of a circular fist pump kind of thing. Well, both of those can be done very well with the plastic tool, so why are we going to have 3 or 4 drawings in the shot when we can do it with just one? So that means that really, with perhaps a little bit of detail drawn in here in terms of the guide, basically we can probably go straight to ink and paint and knock this thing out pretty quickly, especially if the two guys are in separate layers or levels, as Tahoma likes to call it. There is a little bit of an issue here with his anatomy where I'm feeling like his elbow's being kind of lost here, so I'm going to go ahead and shift that over. Actually, let me do that again. I'm going to cut this a little closer so he doesn't actually chop into the other guy quite as much, just for a visual. So that probably makes more sense. If I hit the B key, I can just go ahead and jump back to the brush, and so, you know, he's kind of got a bit of a soggy clothing here, but basically his elbow's right here. So anatomically that makes a little more sense if we visualize what the body would be looking like under there. And probably in his case, most of the plastic tool animation will involve this section here, just basically his forearm. Okie dokie. So having said that, can we jump directly into ink and paint? I think so. So I'm going to go ahead and turn down the sketch. Let's turn off the guides because they are kind of a distraction in this shot. But you know, keep in mind you have these guides here in Tahoma or OpenToonz that are quite useful, especially if you don't consider yourself that great at drawing. It's nice to be able to use a grid to make sure you're measuring things properly and whatnot. But at this point we've got the guide in place, so let's just rock and roll with the drawing. Okay, one more thing I am thinking about here. This guy's hair is kind of flopping over in front. Let me see. Let's go ahead and create a smart raster level. And what just occurred to me is, look, we're seeing this guy's hair. Well, no, we're not. Okay, so I was wrong. I was thinking this was his hair, but I've got it right. His hair is showing through underneath, so this is actually just his headdress, so that makes more sense. Okay, that said, if we're going to see his ear, then that gets us going here. I feel like maybe I want to have a bit more smoothing going on, and as I've sort of been doing lately, I am trying to stay yeah, keep these lines pretty bold, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If we look at this actual size, you can see those lines look pretty crisp, but not too thick. So, and in his case, what we're going to do is sort of delineate the perimeter of his beard and mustache, and then his mouth will just be overlaid over top of it in a separate layer as well, because it's silly to bake the mouth into it, which means we just had to wind up creating 3 different versions of the drawing after all, which is kind of pointless. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this so we can let this maybe make a little bit more sense in terms of, again, gravity. And so that gets us going. Again, let's give a little bit more respect to the gravity of the situation. I think that'll work. Okay, so now he's got his typical kind of shepherdy type headdress. And so yeah, all we need to do is just get these guys drawn, and ink dots of the plastic tool is that once you apply it to a level, you cannot go in and revise the drawing directly in the X sheet. You would have to go over here to the drawing to make tweaks to it. That creates a complication when you are wanting to fold multiple layers into what's being influenced by the plastic tool. Meaning, if this character has the plastic tool animating him, and we're going to put the mouth, actually in this case, because his head's not going to move a lot, this really doesn't matter that much in this particular instance, but what you run into is that the you know, you want the mouth to follow what the plastic tool is doing, so you really need to have the mouth shapes drawn before you apply the plastic tool if you want to do it all live in the X sheet, as it were. So it's just something, again, that's kind of what today's work is about. It's about sort of planning intelligently what you're doing so that you don't create problems for yourself. And again, in this case, that's precisely why I intend to put both of these guys in separate levels. So I want to sort of get this clothing in there in such a way that it's going to look right even when the plastic tool is starting to move things around, because this is what's going to get moved, this area where my mouse is, or my cursor is wiggling around. So looks like we've only got one concurrent viewer right now, which means, not entirely surprising, that for most people this is pretty boring. This is not as glamorous probably as watching Glenn Keane do a pencil test of The Little Mermaid, but on the other hand, the way I look at it is, yeah, but this is an actual show. This isn't just a test or a little demo to see if our software lets us do what we think we want to do. You know, this is real world workflow, and so therefore you have to do the pedestrian. And it's an important question, because most of what makes animation, the work, what it is not the experience that the audience has when it's all said and done. It's way more fun for the audience than it is for the animator. So you really have to love the work and the what I'm describing here today, just the idea of problem solving, and kind of bearing in mind what the experience will be for the audience and for yourself, of course, when you get to go back and look at what you did. These are all things you sort of think about. Well, they're definitely things that you think about when you're deep into a project that's gonna, ultimately take you, well, in my case, a year so far, and ultimately probably 3 or 4 years. Right? This isn't something you just kind of whip out in a week, a day or a week. So one of the things I always have to be cognizant of myself here is that my frames that I'm drawing are in fact larger than what the camera sees. So if I don't go ahead and draw this guy all the way down to the extent of the frame, then we're going to have problems with the fill tool, right? Because this is an open shape and it won't fill. So you do want to be thinking about this stuff, and by doing that, I'm also giving myself the latitude to maybe change the framing a bit if I want to. So now in this guy's case, basically we're done. So let's just save this. We'll save our work. I'm pretty confident with the plastic tool, so for my purposes, there's no reason to go further with the paint work and the plastic tool and the animation. I pretty much know the way this is going to turn out. So for that reason, I'm not going to test anything. I'm just going to move ahead and get the other character in there. Again, always saving frequently as I go. So here we have this similar situation. We just need to get this guy blocked in. One of the things I find a little bit maybe disconcerting at times is, when I'm working on these characters, you think, boy, this really looks extremely simplified, like, especially because when you look at it, the actual size it's going to be on the quote-unquote TV screen or platform or whatever, this is what we actually are dealing with. So I always feel a little sometimes uncomfortable with how sort of simplified and cheeseballed my stuff looks. And in fact, I experienced the same thing with this shot of Golik. But once it was actually rendered and put in the show, it flowed really nicely, So hey, Inio-san, welcome to the live stream this morning. Looks like here we've got a pretty obvious problem with this guy's nose, in that this side of his nose is in the wrong place. So I'll just try to correct that right now. And another thing about this guy, the way I drew his mouth, the way his mouth is sort of queued up to move, does suggest that this guy probably should be drawn like this. We probably should actually just go like this and fill that in. In fact, well, let me think about this for a second. Here's what's going through my mind is the way his mouth is. He's going to start with a closed mouth, and then the mouth is moving quite a lot, like he's yelling out his little protest or whatever. And so, really, we're going to want to animate his jawline, so that this whole section kind of goes up and down like that, right? So we can specify the jawline. But let's bear in mind that probably in another level it's going to be covered up, and basically this whole region is what's going to be animated. So I'm just spelling that out to myself because I don't want to forget. You know, you sort of get lost in the work and you go in and draw everything in there and then realize it's all got to be cut and pasted into a different level. Now we can actually do that. That's actually, now that I'm again saying it out loud, that's actually not a bad idea. Let's do that. So what I'm going to do is take his nose first of all and just get that position properly. And then what I'm going to do is take the most extreme version of his mouth action and draw that. And then that's what we'll actually take this whole section and cut and paste it into another level, and then we'll be able to just animate that piece over top of everything, and that should work just fine. So one thing I've also been doing quite a bit lately is you can see when I'm drawing this that I'm just kind of putting in these little indicator lines, and you know, the upside is that in an actual cartoon that looks better. If you draw lines around everything, it's got a real different look that kind of goes against the sort of anime-ish aesthetic I'm after. And the downside to that, of course, is that you wind up with shapes that aren't fillable because they're actually opened. It's not, you know, his eyes are not a closed shape. So that's why I tend to use this guy over here, the paintbrush tool or the smart raster paint tool, whatever you want to call it, depending on whether you're using Tahoma or OpenToonz. I'm finding myself using that kind of a lot to just fill in areas, of not even use the fill tool, you know. So here we have a situation where what I drew in the sketch is incomplete, so I need to address that right now and do a decent job of it. I don't know about anyone else, but for me this is one of the dangers of working directly from the storyboard, is sometimes I sort of in the sketch I suggest what's going to be there, but I don't actually spell it out. And so then you get but in my mind I see it, right? And then you get into the ink and paint, you realize, okay, now I have to draw this, and I have to draw it precisely where it's going to be. And if there's any doubt, it would be better to go back to the sketch and just scribble it in and get everything figured out first before you start inking it. So that's just a garment, but so then he's got this wrapped around himself. So this is where we kind of want to say, well, all right, there's going to be a little bit of, you know, interaction here in the clothing. Here we've got, again, a belt type situation. I don't like what I just did there. I want this to be a little more level, so I'm going to just draw a line across like that to straighten that out. And he's a little bit of a tubby guy. And also maybe one thing to keep in mind is that the ink lines are probably not going to be black when it's all said and done. They're probably going to be more of a charcoal, like this type of a color. And usually when I'm drawing it, it's kind of easier to leave it black, just because everything's a little clearer. And then I tend to dial in the colors after the fact. So this is, you know, this is feeling pretty good. Doing what I wanted it to do. I'll come back and catch his hand shortly. Now, question, do we want to go ahead and make this symmetrical? Not a bad idea, at least as a starting point, because it could be when I was scribbling this together, I may not have been as careful as I should have been in terms of the positioning of the hands relative to each other. So what I'm going to do is make a selection, move it away from everything else so that if I have to reselect it, it's going to be easy to select. And then come over here, put minus 100 on this, which flips it. And then let's just get this in there. And as you can see, it is in a different position. It's not right or wrong, because obviously what tells me I did an okay job is that if I drew an arc around his shoulder, like his shoulder's here, and if I drew an arc, the hand is basically in the right place. relative to his arms. So it's not necessary for me to make them symmetrical, but in this case I think it looks pretty good, and I'll probably do the same thing with his hand. Now, that brings up an interesting question. And this again kind of speaks to that anime aesthetic. Typically, because of the economies of anime, and obviously the economies of one guy all by himself creating an entire show, one question that occurs to me is, do I want, when this guy's ranting, do I want this guy to be standing there frozen with his arms up? And I'm going to say, because of what we're doing here, that it is basically an anime type of show, I would say yes. He's essentially in a freeze frame that shows an expression. His mouth won't be open, but the basic expression supports what's going on with this guy, and your attention is basically going to be on this guy. So this guy's going to move, and when he stops moving, then this guy will start moving. They're not going to both be moving at the same time. That freeze frames, you'd go, oh my gosh, that guy's like standing there in a completely unrealistic way. You know, but you don't think about it when you're actually watching the show, right? So those are just choices we have to make, you know. Good morning, Maria. Hey, I got your email and looked at your July 4th card. That was very nice. Thank you. Hey, Golden Slime. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, what did I just do? I think I hit shift and accidentally created a straight line situation. Okay, let's undo that. Okay, so let's finish inking this guy. And I think what I'll do is follow the hand is in a little bit of the wrong position, but I am going to follow the idea of it, which is I just want to feel the outline. And then, as I was kind of saying, just judiciously indicate, hint, if you will, the details, like so. All right, so now what I'm going to do is exactly what I said a minute ago. I'm going to go Control C and then Control V, move this away so that I can screw with it. And if because sometimes what happens with OpenToonz or Tahoma, especially if you're like your tablet driver is a little winky, what happens is you go to do something with this selection and you get that. The selection gets lost. Now that with the current version of the driver I have on my tablet, that doesn't happen anymore. It used to happen all the time when I was using OpenToonz as opposed to Tahoma. I actually had a different driver on my tablet running. So just moving it away so you can, you know, really get, you know, mess with it and recover your selection if you need to. So back over here, we can just zoom in and precisely position that and then hit enter, and it looks like everything's looking about right. Okay, so that was quick. So we've got both of these guys inked, and now we can just decide basically on our color scheme. So let's just go through here, and there is no right answer. We're just going to make this up as we go along. So we'll start out with a flesh tone. We'll say this is kind of a ruddy guy who spends a lot of time out in the fields. You know, he's a wealthy merchant working maybe huge, massive herds. So he's got a little bit sun-kissed kind of skin. We're going to need the whites of his eyes. Let's just pick a color, and I would generally tend to make his belt dark-ish. And then the question is, what color is his main costuming going to be? And the answer is, I don't know. Haven't decided yet. So there's that. There's that. We can go ahead and color in his face and then go back. That I really didn't want to do. So yeah, again, here I'm going to hit the V key and just paint that so it's a closed shape. And same situation there. We can probably split the difference here on the whites of his eyes. I'm assuming this is an older guy, so whoops, that we don't want. Okay, so that actually showed you something that can happen. If you create a border line with the Smart Raster Paint tool, when you go to another color, the fill operation will not respect that line. Okay, that line would have to be drawn with the brush tool, not the Smart Raster Paint tool. Excuse me, if you want the fill tool to respect the lines that you're drawing. So the way you mitigate that problem is you actually would have to sketch over that again with your new color. It's a little bit, I mean, it's not a bug, but it definitely is something that really isn't working intuitively the way you would expect the software to work. So to me, that's something the Toonz development community might want to address at some point. So this is fine with that color. Let's think about this, because most of this is going to have a shadow over it as well. So that'll create some distinction in the color schemes. Do we want his collar to be a little different color? I'm going to say why not. So I'm going to use again the Smart Raster Paint tool to just do that. And then, I don't like that. I think I'm going to stick with it as is. What happens if we color it like that and then let's just play around with potentially other colors. What I don't want to do is get into like, well, let me strike what I just said. Maybe I do. If the colors are muted, I don't know. I don't consider myself great with color. It's probably one of my biggest weaknesses is color theory. And whoopsie poo, stop. This needs to be just areas, not lines and areas. Otherwise it covers up my outlines. But it's pretty cool that you can select that, because then you can use this brush tool to completely paint over an area very quickly, as opposed to having to draw outlines and then fill them, you know, and on it goes. So good example of that actually would be right here. Right here we see a little bit of a flaw in our outline. So if we switch this to lines and areas, we can just go in and fix it like that. So now that's a detail that in truth is not really necessary, because actually actual size you'd never notice that, especially if there's shadows on his face, which there will be. Again, the outlines really need to be more of a charcoal color. And then one more thing I want to do is age this guy a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of do that this way. And then take a look. Hey Max, do you know about tweening in animation? Yeah, of course. What's your question? I mean, when you use the plastic tool, obviously it's doing the tweening for you. When you use the animate tool, it's doing the tweening for you. When you're doing hand-drawn cell frame, you know, frame by frame animation, you've got to make your own tweens. So there were a couple shots I did last week that were basically that, where I just really for fun, because there's more than one way to tackle any shot, obviously. And I had a couple shots last week, as I recall, where I deliberately did frame by frame animation and bake my own tweens, just because it's, you know, it's fun to do, you know, keep you busy. In this case, I chose not to. I'm choosing not to do that for this particular shot. Instead, I'm gonna go ahead and let the you know, we want to make them a little different, but they're pretty muted, and actually the range of color is fairly limited. That's usually a good thing. And maybe that's probably the area of improvement I'm looking for in my own work. Probably have a lot to do with that, with just not getting too wide a range going on. Let's use the lighter color here. I mean, these guys are out in the field. Obviously, they probably want to be wearing lighter clothes. So that's a good example right there of where it's really too saturated, so the saturation of it is jumping out. And then we can play around with whether we want to lighten it, so it just sort of sits in the mix better. So that looks better to me, I would say. And then I would say the wrap around his headdress probably wants to be that color. So you guys can feel free to criticize. Again, I do not consider myself, if I had the resources and the situation was right to have a staff or a team doing parts of the show, that would be one of the first things I would outsource, would be just the color, just figuring out what the color schemes need to be on the costuming, and probably background paintings. Okay, so Max, I'm going to look at your comments now. It is creating symmetrical poses. It should be avoided. You have a guy behind symmetrical. It hurts me to watch him. I've been pounded on it by my teacher so much it's like using caps. Okay. Um, I don't know if I agree on this shot. I kind of went over that about 10 minutes ago, I think, maybe 20. In this case, I don't I for the purpose of whoever's watching, Max is not wrong, okay? Um, Symmetrical poses are generally frowned on, and probably for good reason. The original sketch of this guy wasn't symmetrical, so Max is bringing up an issue that's a little separate from what I mentioned before. What I mentioned before was, are we going to leave this guy frozen in this position from the very start of the shot, and then when the guy on the left is done ranting, then this guy on the right starts moving, and the guy on the left, goes into a freeze frame. That would be extremely normal for anime. I see it all the time. However, Max is correct that ideally the guy probably would not be perfectly symmetrical. I think that I don't completely... I get where that comes from the standpoint of animation theory. If you look at the character in silhouette, absolutely, I'm very well aware that assuming that the pose is readable in silhouette, so if this was, if all these colors were black and this was just a silhouette, there's no question in your mind what's going on here. This is a guy with his hands up in the air. Okay, but what Max is bringing up is, well, yeah, but he shouldn't be symmetrical. He should be, so nothing about him is symmetrical except this arm. So if we want to address that, we can certainly do so. I mean, let's get rid of this, and then all we need to do, all we need to do is hit the selection tool, and we would select this, and then we would just kind of presume that this arm would probably be more out like that. And so at least we've got some more normal, because, let's face it, in the real world, nothing's ever symmetrical. Even faces, obviously, are not actually symmetrical, even though they're close. So, as a concession to user feedback, I'm going to go ahead and respect Max's judgment and say, okay, fine, let's go ahead and at least make him so he's not perfectly symmetrical. And you're correct, that is easier to look at. Definitely. Now the problem we have, actually, okay, so this is actually, I'm glad this happened. So now what we have is a tangent. Okay, so Max is going to chime in about that if I don't do something about it. So look at this. See where his thumb ended up relative to the edge of this guy's hat? That is even worse. Okay, so if you weren't going to move the guys around at all, I would say, yeah, Max, guess what? This is even worse than what I had before, because even though we've solved one problem, we've introduced another problem that's an even more egregious thing to see in an animation. Well, we can kind of address that this way. Let's just move these guys around a bit. I'm going to turn the guides back on, and let's just kind of take a chill pill here for half a second and think about what we have here. Whoops, I didn't mean to hit the fill. Okay, so number one, from the standpoint of the rule of thirds, this guy is in the wrong position to begin with. So let's go ahead and select the whole guy. I'm not going to use the animate tool. I'm going to actually modify the drawing. This guy should actually be here. Now, if we're going to do what we're doing, we still have this tangent problem. Okay, and so we've got a couple options. One would be to kind of anchor his edge on the rule of thirds, and that's probably not too bad. That puts him in a good position. Now this guy, sort of by the same token, we probably would want to anchor him more like here, and that puts his left eye right on the intersection of the rule of thirds. So, and thank you, Max. I appreciate your input on this. So from a compositional standpoint, that right there is a much stronger composition than what I had just a moment ago. And the only thing I'm doing that's a little bit of a cheat, I guess I would say, would be to allow this guy to be slightly off the rule of thirds just to basically get his hand where I want it to be. Because I do want to do the freeze frame thing. I don't want to animate the guy. I mean, I literally deliberately want to leave him in a freeze frame until he goes ahead and does his part of the shot. That's a judgment call having to do with just adhering to some of the aesthetics of anime that I'm familiar with. We could kind of split the difference by moving this. Like I don't want him here because we do have perspective. We are looking down on the situation. So as long as his eye is on the line of the rule of thirds, I think we're okay, especially because his mouth, which is going to be talking, is almost on the intersection point. So I would say right there looks like a pretty good composition to me. Max, feel free to chime in if you disagree. His face to tilt his head, close one eye a bit, like 5%. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. No, once is enough even for me. Once is enough even for me. I'm not sure what you're referring to there because I kind of was talking for a bit, and so I lost track of what you're referring to. But, okay, so the other thing Max is saying is let's just do this. Let's take this color, making sure I got the right layer here, and let's make this guy more. You could leave one eye more open, obviously, but for me, I'm going to say, that gets us. So we're just introducing some variability in the drawing. When I seem a little bit defensive in what I'm doing against what they teach in animation school, it's normally because I am aware of the rules, and I'm also keeping in mind that there is absolutely, in my opinion, a tug of war between conventional practice in anime storytelling versus what you're going to learn if you study the Nine Old Men, and are really getting anchored in Disney type character animation. There is a tug of war where over time it seems to me that the economies of producing the volume of anime that you have to produce has caused certain aesthetics to become normalized in our mind where we're comfortable with them and we expect them. And so I do make myself some allowances in that regard, just depending on the situation. But I can't dispute that Max's suggestion made it better, and that's great. I love it. The other thing I think I want to do on this guy is I want to kind of make his clothing situation slightly more complex, like this, so that I can introduce a third color here. And this may backfire. I may decide this wasn't the greatest idea I've ever had, but let me see. What I want to do is grab this color and then just create a very slight variation. And saturation's not the answer. And I would say slightly darker. Whoops, that's not what I just meant to do. Slightly lighter. Maybe a tiny bit of saturation, and then take the fill tool and fill that. I don't like it. I actually like it simpler. I think I want to let the shadows carry the day in terms of, right now these guys look too flat, but the shadows are going to change that in a big way, as they always do. So I kind of have a pretty decent sense of what the shadows are going to do. So yeah, don't feel bad, Max. If you've got multiple comments, it sounds like you're coming at it at this point from the vantage point of somebody who's going to school and probably studying best practices in animation. And so feel free, man. It's all good. It's all good, brother. I'm down with it. Okay, so now what we want to do is we got to think about what we're going to do here. If we're going to add the plastic tool to each of these guys, we're probably going to want to get Actually, the best thing to do, truthfully, would be to put both of these guys in a sub scene so that the plastic tool can act on the whole. That's what I'm going to do. That's the best thing. So you want to talk about best practices? Best practices in OpenToonz or Tahoma2D is to do what I'm about to do right now, which is I'm going to hit Control-Shift down arrow, which for me creates, takes whatever levels I've got selected and turns them into a sub-scene. So now I go down into this, and all we have is this guy. So now why did I do that? This way I can go ahead and add the lip sync and the shadows on the static drawing, and then when I come up into my main scene, I can apply the plastic tool to that collection of levels, and then that's what I'll animate with the plastic tool. So I'm going to do that with both of these levels. I often do that for backgrounds too. You know, use the subscenes liberally. Okay, so Carlos asks, do I draw with a tablet? And the answer is correct. I'm using a digital, an XP Pen Digital Artist 15.6. And it is, actually I'm going to wait for OBS to reconnect. Waiting for OBS. This is, I mean, what OBS is doing today. OBS is performing terribly today. The performance of OBS is horrendous today. We already have a 30-second delay in the live stream after only 45 minutes, which is pathetic. Okay? So for that I apologize. Everything I'm saying right now, you're hearing 30 full seconds after I say it. But to answer Carlos's question, it's an XP Pen Digital Artist 15.6 screen. So let's just go like this, and this is what I'm using. Okay, Digital Artist XP, or I'm XP Pen Digital Artist 15.6. I've been very, very happy with the tablet, and I've had it for a couple years now. It's been great to work with. Okay, so I'm going to go down into the sub scene, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save my work. That's what I'm going to do. But we don't have to animate anything here. All we have to do is just punch it up. So when I say punch it up, I mean add some details that make it look cool and everything. So I'm going to create a vector level because that's my normal practice, is to create a vector level. There's literally no reason, by the way, for me to have all these. For this to be stretched down like that is completely unnecessary. We can bake everything into one flat layer, and it'll all animate just fine in the you know, up here. So up here, if I now go resequence, you'll see that there's only one frame. But once I'm ready to use the plastic tool, I'll just extend this. So it treats the sub scene as whatever you want it to be, a single frame or a sequence of frames, whatever you want. It works. So this is cool because we can go ahead and do transparency for rendering. That means that if I change the opacity of an individual level, that will be taken into account in the render. So why did I do that? Well, I did that so I can go in and start putting in shadows. By using the vector level for the shadows, I can use auto close, auto group, auto fill, and when I draw a shape, it automatically gets filled in for me. And as you can see, we already have the transparency because the transparency is not in the material, it's in the level. There's reasons for that I won't get into, but if you're trying to use vector levels for shadows the way I'm using them, take my word on this one that generally if you're going to introduce transparency into the vector level, you probably want to do it at the level. Wow, terminology. As opposed to baking that transparency into the color or the palette. Again, I don't want to get into the reasons why. One reason why I guess I'll mention is this. If I had it baked into, if I was using the transparency on the material, then what I'm doing right here would not work. Here's why. You can see that the opacity, the transparency is stacking up on itself right here. So wherever the shapes I drew overlapped, it's darker. But when it renders, that will not be the case. And that's because the decision of how to render the transparency, it happens after everything we're seeing here. Everything we're seeing here has to do with swaths of color piled on top of each other. But that then is overruled by the settings on the level itself. So hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to kind of have some fun going through here and giving this guy some shadows to, as I like to say, punch it up a bit. Just bring it to life. Shadows are so hugely helpful and important for that. What looked pretty good can all of a sudden look really good when you start applying the shadows. And so I use this technique on background painting as well. I'll use a vector level, block in the local color of something that's in the background just as a flat shape of color, and then use multiple shapes of transparent black to actually just build in planes of value. So I'm kind of doing it here, but of course the way I'm doing it, so like I could punch this up even more like that, but that's not going to show up in the render because I'm using this as a single flat semi-transparent level for the purpose of shadows, which I want the shadows to basically be pretty uniform. And then this is all just a judgment call. You know, what are you going to do as far as how you add a little bit of volume. Another thing is you can use a post-production effect in the schematic to make it so that you don't have to be careful here, like I'm being careful about staying in the lines. You can, there's multiple ways, very easy, to make it so that I could scribble like that and it would be clamped, the shadows would be clamped to the character. In this case, the way I'm doing it, it's pretty easy and quick to stay in the lines, so I'm not going to bother with it as a post-production effect. Plus it sort of forces me to think more like a painter. You know, it's not a bad thing to sort of have to stay in the lines and be careful about how you draw and paint, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, here we're going to allow a little bit of shadow to come in. So we're kind of assuming these guys are somewhat backlit. And by the way, you know, similar to what we have here with Golic, most of this shading is simply the body highlight effect. And I would expect on these guys it's going to be the same thing. You know, I'm going to put the body highlight effect probably on the opposite side. So you'll see a highlight on this side of the guy, which will, again, help really make it pop. So let's just kind of assume we probably want a little bit of this type of thing. And then just for illustration purposes, I'll just show you right now that if we take and for this guy, basically the local color, the way the sun's shining, which for Golic it was coming from his right, so for this guy it would be coming from his left since they're facing each other. So what you would do is you would turn on the fully rendered view. You would go into the effects schematic, and then there's multiple ways we could do this, but generally what I would do is I would take this column, the character, and I would insert a light body highlight, and so you can see what it did right away. Now what I was kind of starting to say is that that's actually not what I want. I don't want to take the local color and lighten it. What I actually want to do is darken it so that it's actually only the local color that shows up in the area that's being hit by the sun. So how do you do that? Well, you just reverse the effect. So you invert it, and instead of the effect being done with white, it's being done with black. And obviously you can pick any color. Okay, so now there's the effect. And now if we crank the transparency up and then just kind of start dialing it down to see where it feels about right. That's pretty close to what I'm going to want for this guy. With the caveat that the 4.5 pixels of blur for me is too much. I'm going to knock that down to like 2 pixels because I feel like the shadow, yeah, I want that to be a little bit crisper. So basically that's what you get. And you'll notice when you go up into the main sub scene, or the main scene, you will also notice that if you look at the schematic here, you don't see the effect. So that's kind of a cool thing to remember, is that your effects are baked into the specific scene or subscene that you create them in. And that way you can just keep your compositing environment clean. You know, I tend to want to make things as local to what they're operating on as possible. I could have done it here, in which case it would have added the effect to everything, because technically the shadows are not being taken into account here. Technically the effect is only on, sorry, that was wrong. Technically it's only affecting this level. It's actually not affecting the shadows. So there is not a darkening of the shadows taking place. It's not a big deal. It's just a choice. I could have taken this. I could have gone Control X here, grab this here, and then hit Control V, and now it should actually cause a little, yep, it causes a little bit of a darkening of the shadows, because what I'm doing is I'm actually adding the body highlight effect to the entire scene. Makes sense? I hope so. Okay, so now we got to think about timing here a little bit, because the problem is that actually he's going to have to sit tight while the other guy does his ranting, and then we need to figure out when he's supposed to talk. So there's no question that this is probably going to have to be stretched down. We're going to have to bake some animation into this shot, but we're still going to add the plastic tool on the you know, one level up. Okay, so okie doke. So there's that. One thing I'm thinking of is that I feel like the shadows are actually a little too dense. Usually I'm about 12%. Here we're at 18. Let's split the difference. Go with 14. I don't know. Probably. I mean, it's a little nitpicky here, of course, but basically I think that's probably not too shabby. I think that'll work. Okay. Having said that, now what I'm noticing is maybe a little bit let me turn that back into preview mode. Let's see what the, oh, I see. Okay, that is all the same color. And that would be the bell. I think I'm going to leave that as is for the moment. Okay, so now what we can do is let's just deal with his mouth, and we'll pretend he talks right away, which he doesn't, but then we'll deal with the timing afterwards. So what I'm going to do is create a new level, go over here, hit the selection tool, and what I'm going to do is grab this whole area like that, Control C, Control V. So now that put a copy of it in here and recreated the palette for me. Okay, so now I can already see a problem. Okay, what I'm gonna do, sometimes I have to work these things out one little step at a time. The first thing I'm gonna do is erase his mouth. There's no reason for it to be in there. That's just causing distraction. And the other thing is that this is the open mouth position. So really, this is kind of wrong. What I need to do, I'm just going to do this as crudely as possible and then clean it up. So what I'm going to do is grab this whole section, because this is going to animate. So I'm going to grab this whole section and move it up. Okay, so that's really what we should be seeing as far as his jawline before he starts talking. All right, so then, as I said, now the task is to just clean this up a bit, right? That could maybe have a line there. I'm going to sample to grab this color from the palette so I can then go in and just paint over this. I could use the fill tool, obviously, and actually I probably should, but boink, boink. So that works. So that gets that pounded into shape a little better, and if we look at it at actual size, looks fine. Okay, so Claude is here. Hey Claude, you just finished your homework. Good man, good man. Alright, so now what we need to do is create 3 variations here. Okay, so I'm going to go D key, and I don't normally do it this way actually, but in this case I'm going to. So what I'm going to do is just grab this and smack that right to there. Okay, and now I'm going to make yet another duplicate, and this one is going to be a little bit lower on the jaw. Let me see this. Okay, yeah, this is obviously stupid looking. That didn't make any sense. So I'm going to smack that up there. And what we'll do is we'll discover whether we have to make more adjustments to the underlying drawing, which it looks like we will have to. So that's fine. That's no big deal. I didn't make it high enough. So that's where the liquify tool in Krita would make my life a little easier, because I'd be able to just grab a section and sort of squish it into place, right? But then here, what we want to do is hit the V key and actually close this down to, and I don't care about the lack of aliasing here. You're never going to see that when it renders. Okay, and then just for completeness, I'm going to create a 4th drawing that's going to be essentially closed mouth shape for this guy, which I'm going to actually follow Max's advice on this point and leave it kind of a little bit unbalanced. Okay, and then let's go ahead and raise the outline shade up a bit. Okay, so now we've got the pieces we need to do the lip sync. Why that created a new drawing there? I made a mistake. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to actually save my work just to be safe, and then I'm going to delete. So Claude's doing a virtual learning. It's a beautiful thing. So now that doesn't exist anymore, so let's hit Control X and get it out of there. And now let's fix this. If we put this over top of it and go to this, go to this drawing here, you can see what we have. Now actually, there's a case to be made to not fix it, actually, as I'm looking at it. Why? Well, it kind of looks like the guy's got a bit of a double chin situation. Wide, close, close. Yeah, I guess I don't like that. So let's fix it up. All right, so we'll come back over here. Excuse me. And we have a little bit of a problem here, because what I need to do is move all this down and then take this drawing and move it up, so that when I'm looking at this drawing, I can see what's going to be affected by the shape that reveals the most of what's underneath. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so it seems to me that the easiest fix here is going to be to grab this entire section and just move it north. Okay, and then, just like we did before, just go in and hand paint this. I think I will paint out those extra lines, but that should really be areas, so we're not filling in over top of our outlines. Okay, and now the other bit of a hiccup is the fact that this shadow is kind of in the wrong place. So I'm again going to save my work, save. And then in this case, I think what I'm going to do is hit the S key and see if we can just grab that. Okay, hello. And then move it north a little bit. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape. This is what the guy's going to look like until he starts talking, and then when he starts talking, you're going to be seeing Okay? Question becomes, well, when does that happen? And the answer is, we don't know yet, and we don't really care, because what we're going to do is, this guy talks first. And by the way, this is something that you could call it, it's not really a bug, but it's kind of the way Tahoma works, is that if you have transparency baked into a level, like I did at the, I hate to say this, but at the level, Mikhail, are you talking about my live action films? Because that YouTube channel is the channel that my distributor runs, and my 2 chick flick horse movies are available there. And then I have a third film, which is kind of a sort of a farcical comedy, basically. It's about a criminal who... It's about a criminal on the run who... He's a bank robber who, to avoid capture, ducks into a building which turns out to be a church, and he begins to play the role of the new pastor that the church has been waiting to arrive any day. And he winds up being the best pastor they ever had, even though he's a bank robber. And it's quite a fun movie, actually. It's always gotten really good audience response, but it is not currently available anywhere. So I actually have it on YouTube. I actually had talked to... Okay, so the 2 I'm sorry, I said encourage. I spelled that wrong. Encourage TV. I'm sorry. My bad. Typing too fast. Okay, so there's where you can find the 2 chick flick horse movies. They're called Healed by Grace and then Healed by Grace 2. And then I just told Valerie yesterday, you know, I should just do this. I'm going to do this literally this minute. I'm going into my YouTube channel. You guys are seeing this happen live. And I'm going to actually go through right now, as we speak, and I'm going to my uploads, and I'm going to make this public. I've been thinking about doing this. There's not really any reason not to. If I wind up taking the time to work out some distribution thing for this other movie, I can always take it back off YouTube. So at the moment, I'm actually doing a quick search on my channel, and I'm about to actually make public the feature film that I have that is actually not really public anywhere at the moment. So public, and there it is. So assuming everything worked correctly, at this very moment the feature film Clerical Errors should now be visible on YouTube. And as I say, for me, at this point in time, just because of what I've got going on in my life related to developing the cartoons, I don't really see any reason to keep this private. I might as well release it and kind of see if hopefully people enjoy it. So there's that. I'm actually now closing this up, looking at my YouTube channel to see if all of a sudden that appeared. And it doesn't look like it did. It might take a little time for... So yeah, right now all that is showing is the teaser and the trailer. So it's a movie called Clerical Errors. And all that's showing right now is the teaser and the trailer, which you can find on my channel. But actually the movie should be available now as well. I'm going to double check that, so bear with me, guys. Forgive me for taking a moment to do this. As I said, it was something I've been kind of meaning to do. And I'm just going to go through my channel right now and just see if it's showing up. And I have so many live streams that I have to... Okay, back to work. So I'm going to go here, back to the live stream. Okay. All right, so yeah, that was done in, I think, 2015. It's really a fun movie. We had a lot of fun making it, too. Unfortunately, the guy that starred in it has passed away. He died pancreatic cancer got my friend Donio. So what we're going to do is animate this guy first so that we can then use the timing of when he's done being animated to figure out when the other guy's supposed to start talking. So we're going to go through the same process we went through before. And that means we're going to just use a vector level to create our shadows. But yeah, I made 8 films, as I've said many times, half in jest, but only half. I've made 3 good ones, and the chick flick horse movies have been quite successful. I mean, Healed by Grace 2, the sequel, which is, it's kind of this is a happy news for me, is that the sequel is actually performing better than the original at this point in time, which is really cool because I own the sequel completely. So all the royalties from that movie go to me, whereas the original was done for a intermediate third party who actually made most of the money from that movie. So, which is pretty sad since it made about $1 million. But that can't happen today. What happened back in 2011, 2012, whenever I released it, couldn't happen today because there was a retail marketplace at that point in time that doesn't exist anymore. It's literally, with the advent of streaming media, the retail marketplace just literally collapsed, more or less overnight, and destroyed the climate that made that success possible. Couldn't happen. You can still have a successful movie, but you're not going to have the type of, because DVDs aren't a thing anymore, and most of the sales for that film were in the form of DVDs that people bought in a store. And of course, such stores don't exist anymore. So, well, that's the funny thing about the movie world. I mean, there's more opportunity to quote-unquote get your movie out there than ever before, but it is hard to actually make money from it, or, you know, make a living making feature films. But, you know, having said that, we were just talking yesterday about, you know, it would be fun to go back and make another live-action movie, maybe. I'm a weird guy in the world of filmmaking because every film I've ever made cost about $8,000 to make, like out-of-pocket cost, the actual complete cost in total of making the film was about $8,000 in every single movie. And that wasn't by design. That was just how it turned out. And all the money that was spent was to pay the actors. I've never had to pay for a location or anything like that. And on the sequel to Healed by Grace, that expense included paying a fairly major Hollywood actress to be in the film, you know, which of course was Sean Young. We were just talking yesterday about how, you know, Sean Young she has a reputation as a Hollywood bad girl, you know, that she's hard to work with. It's all BS. None of it's true. She was great to work with. I really enjoyed working with Mary. Her real name's Mary, not Sean. I mean, Sean's her middle name, but yeah, you know, there are certain things that actresses in Hollywood are sometimes asked to do, let's say, that back in the 90s, Mary didn't really want to play that game. And it did cause her to somewhat get blacklisted, I think. Yeah, you could argue it, you could debate it, but no, she's a very nice person and very easy to work with. Did a great job, too. Well, what I did was, in order to improve the saleability of the film, the distributor I was working with at the time, who I don't work with anymore, they kind of went belly up too, but they really wanted to see some sort of name actor in the film, right? So I'm like, okay, well, who do we get? And we basically made our decision based on looking at IMDb and seeing who was scoring really well. And Sean Young just came up in the list, and we're like, okay, well, let's approach her and see. That's an interesting thing. If you're into filmmaking, and for those of you who've maybe heard this story before, you know, forgive me for telling the story, but if you're into filmmaking, and you're not experienced with dealing with actors and that sort of thing, you might think that when you approach a Hollywood actor through their management, that the first thing they're going to want to do is see the script, you know, see if it's a project they want to be involved with. That's completely not true at all. Most Hollywood actors, they just want to work. They just want to stay busy, typically. And so when you contact their management company or their agent, whatever you want to call it, about a project, they're going to be very curt, very straight to the point. They're going to say, are you or are you not making an offer? Yes or no? And if so, what is the offer? That's all they want to know. And basically, if the offer is sufficient for that actor to get the rate for a day of work that they expect, then they'll probably do it. You know, that's what you actually find happens. So we had talked to, oh geez, what's her name? Dawn Wells, who actually passed away this last year. I think COVID got her, actually. So Dawn Wells played Mary on Gilligan's Island. Mary Ann, I'm sorry. Mary Ann, not Mary. She played Mary Ann, and she was the role that we gave to Sean Young. Dawn actually wanted the role. She thought it was a cool role and wanted to do it. And just for various reasons that basically had to do with her rating, her ranking on IMDb, we just decided to go with Sean Young. I don't think that it would have made a shred of difference in the long run who we used. It's just the distributors, they want to see it. They want to see the picture and the name of an actor people recognize on the DVD cover, you know, back when DVDs were a thing, or the movie poster that you're going to see on the streaming platforms. It's nice to be able to have that name that people recognize, right? So that's pretty much all there is to that. Okay, it looks like we're in good shape here. We got the shadows done. File, save all. So yeah, hopefully clerical errors will show up here on the... So it looks like the market's kind of taking a beating today. It's definitely a bit of a pullback. Last week was a pretty good week. And then today, not unexpected at all. The stocks are definitely pulling back and not having a great day. But again, not unexpected. So now we got to make a decision. When Golic is interrupted by this guy says, hey, what about these taxes? Okay, so I'm actually editing the script right now. I'm going to add, hey, Golic. Remember, these guys are nobles. Okay, they're not peons in the community, and you know, he's comfortable speaking up to the guy that works beside the king. Okay, this is a fairly small kingdom. So that's who this guy is, and what he says is, hey, Golic, what about these taxes? Okay. So that's the line of dialogue. Well, what we actually have in the show is we've got hey Golic happening here. Hey Golic. And then it cuts to this guy. What about these taxes? And then he says, yeah, without crops, how can we pay? That's what the second guy says. Okay, so that's cool. So that means we're basically going to be jumping right into the lip sync. So normally I want to give us a shot, a few frames of a breather before I start the guys talking. Typically 4 frames, but in this case I'm only going to give it 2 or 3, let's say 3, because he already said the first part of his line. So I'm going to use a vector level, the same way I did with the shadows. I'm gonna go 1, 2. Okay, and this is, I've explained this before, but I'll explain it here again. This is anime convention for lip sync, at least as I've been able to discern it from watching anime. What you have is open mouth, more open mouth, and those 2 poses happen twice, and then they're followed typically, and I'm going to save my work just in case, because what I'm doing right now by automatically creating frames with the vector tool tends to make Tahoma crash. Okay, so you get open mouth, more open mouth, more open mouth, and then almost closed mouth. Okay? So this cycle of 5 frames allows you to have something that's going to be translated into multiple languages, and the lip sync always works. Okay? So I'm going to put 2 cycles of it, and he's going to say, presumably, what about these taxes? Let's see how it works. What about these taxes? See, it's perfect. So just be aware. I mean, your mileage may vary, but what I've found is this always works. Open, more open, open, more open, almost close. So it's a 5-frame sequence that works for all lip sync all the time. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit transparent so that the local color bleeds through a little bit, like that. Okay? All right, so if we get this going, and he does that, then I would say 24 frames is probably about right. But to keep it simple and not have to mess too much with the structure of it in the upper level, okay, let me restate what I'm trying to say here. I have 2 choices. I can leave this as it is and stretch the last frame in the containing scene that it's nested in, or and resequence it. So now this level is going to reflect those 24 frames that are in the nested shot. And then I can go ahead and extend this final frame as far as I need to, right? So let's just say, for our purposes, probably 60 frames will do the trick. All right. This guy, on the other hand, we still have to animate. Now, I think I'll dive in and just do the plastic tool now. Do you make a living from movies? No, actually, good. That's actually a really fair question. You know, especially because Mr. Filmmaker guy, bragger guy here, always talks about how Healed by Grace made $1 million. Well, it did, but actually, and this was almost 10 years ago. Okay, only about, I would say, to date, that movie's probably made me about $80,000. So, and that's over 10 years. So it's not that great. The sequel earns about, that's the reality of the modestly budgeted independent film, you know. And so the answer is no. I have a number of clients for whom I do commercial media services that range from, I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've done website development for clients. I've done musical radio jingles. I have many clients all over the country who, if you call their business and they stick you on hold, like you call them and then they say, please hold, you're going to actually hear me saying, hey, thanks for calling XYZ company. Did you know that we've just released this new product that you'd be interested in? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that service is, you know, has paid the bills for 30 years. So business to business commercial media services are really my bread and butter. And the entertainment media has been a good adjunct. It's been certainly nice to have, you know, but not adequate to actually make a respectful living, I wouldn't say. Now, the cartoons could change that. You know, once we get, if we get a dozen over the next 3-4 years, if we get a dozen episodes of this show out, and it proves to have a good shelf life, about between $400 and $600 a month. So sorry about that. It's basically between it's around $500 a month. Is what it seems to earn. Now that could change. The good news about that is that it's been increasing. So that means my distributor's doing a better and better and better job of getting it out on the media platforms in a way that's earning a little revenue here and a little revenue there. You know, it makes a little money on Tubi, it makes a little money on YouTube, you know, Pluto TV, you name it, Amazon Prime. It's on all those platforms, and you just make a little here and you make a little there, and then, you know, tally it up. So yeah, it's about, on average, about $500 a month, you know, which is great. You know, I mean, it's a lot of work. You're working pretty hard for at least 6 months creating a movie from start to finish. So if you work really hard for 6 months and then you get and if you made, you know, if you made $50,000, let's say, from that movie, you know, that's pretty good, but it's not like amazing. You're not going to live for the next 5 years on that, right? So it doesn't show the missed video, so I don't think it's really worth having this setting that makes it. Doesn't show the missed video. Okay. Well, I mean, you know, Darren, thank you. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, who cares? You know, what do I care if people know what the movie earns? Frankly, most of the people that, if someone's going to watch this channel and they have any interest in independent filmmaking, they are inundated every day with really, really bad information. And the hardest thing to do to discover when you go out there and actually talk to people is to get them to tell you the truth about the earning potential. You know, you're going to sit here, you want to make a cartoon, you know, well, how much money are you going to make from this cartoon? That's the question. And the hope would be, we don't know, but the hope would be that one 24-minute episode of this cartoon, accrued over a year of earnings, would actually earn about $1,000 a month. We would hope. That's what we would be shooting for. Okay, so that's kind of the magic number. Now, if you go back and you look at the time it takes you to create this film or this show, all right, and you accrue that over the year, you look at, well, what did I actually have to do to earn that $1,000? You're getting down to the range where, at the end of the day, what really just happened was that cartoon earned $500 per finished minute. Well, guess what? If I created an explainer video for somebody, I'd be earning about $1,000 to $1,500 to maybe $2,000 per finished minute. So in the big scheme of things, if you really look at your time versus your revenue picture, it's not that great. But if you're having fun, and over time, so what I just did makes way more sense. What I just did was I killed the live stream literally manually and then restarted it. So I agree with you, Darren. You're right. We completely lose the interactivity. Hopefully right now, I don't know how YouTube dealt with it. So like on YouTube, it probably is allowing the delay to prevail. I'm not sure. But as far as what I'm saying right now, according to OBS, there's only a 1 second delay. So how YouTube's going to deal with that, the fact that I just killed it and told OBS to discard the delay, I don't know what's going to happen on the live stream. Hopefully what's about to happen is it's just going to jump. It's just going to jump to real time, more or less. I'm going to look at my settings here. And okay. So stream delay, automatically reconnect is enabled. Preserve the cutoff point. That's the problem. Preserving the cutoff point is not working. And that's annoying. I don't know who to blame for that. I don't know. Okay. The stream just would that would be right. The stream just flipped again. So right now we should be kind of close to real time. I'm looking at the preview right now to see what we have. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a quick transition so that I can see it in the live preview to see how far behind we are. Because OBS is only 1 second behind right now. There we go. Okay, so now we're more like about 5 seconds behind. So, yeah, I apologize for that. I'm taking your advice, Darren. What I just did was I went into the OBS settings and the option to preserve the cutoff point, I've gotten rid of it because OBS is doing it and it's not actually working through to YouTube. So if OBS is preserving the delay, but for you guys it's being chopped anyway, so what's the point? So sorry about that, for you guys that are being very patient through a lot of discussion that is either technical about the live stream connection or about movie making and not really doing animation. For those of you that bums you out, I apologize for that. Okay, so now what I need to do is kind of relook at the timing situation here. So this is made somewhat difficult by the fact that I can't see the guy's mouth. Oh, there it goes. Boom. Okay, so we're going to have to start him talking on about frame 19. So let's go down into this sub-X sheet. And it looks like I actually timed it almost right. So I'm going to put his line of dialogue here. And again, these are in the wrong order. Okay, so these are in the wrong order. We want to follow that convention I described earlier. So right now we're almost real time on the live stream. And I'm going to just leave the preserve delay option turned off because it's clearly not working. Okay, so this guy's probably going to want to use this cycle 3 times, I suspect. because his line of dialogue is, "Yeah, without crops, how can we pay?" Okay? That's what he says. So I'm assuming this is going to happen 3 times. And then we'll have closed mouth to wrap it up. Okay? And then I'll just stretch this down to here for kicks and giggles. Okay? And so this is wrong. This needs to be popped over here and stretched down here. I could have, actually there's another way to do this. Okay, this is one way to do it. Just grab it, move it over to another level. I'll show you the other thing you can do is you can select this range, and I believe the option is fill in empty cells, and that just fills it in. I think it bumped everything down a frame too, I'm not sure, but let's see. No, I guess it didn't, so there you go. Alright, so he's waiting. "Yeah, without crops, how can we pay?" That's a little bit short, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and give this guy another cycle. 2, 1, 2, 1, 3. Control C, Control V, and then we'll stretch these out to all match it, and we should be good. Okay? Got word that it's my week for time. 4th of July. Quick outline. Cats will be starting again. Well, hey Ninja Go Fan Burst. Welcome to the live stream. Always nice to have new people. Okay, so we're going to resequence. Now this sub sheet or sub X sheet if you're in OpenToonz, sub scene if you're in Tahoma2D. It's just different terminology for the same thing. This now needs to be resequenced. So when we resequence it, it'll stretch out to what's precisely in the underlying sub scene, and then we can go ahead and extend this down to sort of bring both of these down to an appropriate ending point for the scene in general. So now we're set up to go ahead and add the plastic tool to each of these guys, and the plastic tool is going to fold in everything about the characters, their drawing, their shadow, their lip sync, everything. So let's save our work. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And so we're just going to start with this guy first, since he has the first line of dialogue. And again, just so you know, there's nothing we can do, as far as I know, there's nothing we can do about the fact that the transparency that's baked into the shadow layer does not propagate up to the containing level. As far as I know, there's nothing you can do about that. I've never been aware of a way to mitigate that problem. If it was really a problem, which it could be if you could not see your lip sync, okay, then the solution would be just temporarily turn this level off. Well, not the lip sync level, but the shadow level. And actually, this is probably the right solution. Turn it off. Why? Because now you can't see it. Look at this. We can't see it, but it will still render because we didn't turn this icon off. We only turned off this icon. So the live preview, we've solved the visual problem, but yet when it renders, the shadows will still be there. And now that's interesting that it rendered the shadows completely opaque. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So for me, I'm not really quite getting that, but it may turn out that we need to modify the shadow density via the schematic in order to get everything to work properly. Not a big deal one way or the other. See, when I leave it visible in the fast preview, it renders properly in the render view, so I don't quite get that, but that's okay. We're going to ignore that. All right, so right now, what do we have going on OBS? Yeah, we still have a delay of 1 second, so if you were superstitious, you'd say that turning off the stream delay compensation actually caused it to quit disconnecting. Yeah, Darren is correct. So, all right, so we're hitting the plastic tool and we're going to create a mesh. So there it is. We'll apply that. We're going to choose a different path so it gives it a unique name. And why? Okay. That's interesting. I've never seen mesh creation take that long. So that might have something to do with, okay. Darren, I will tell you, buddy, I did not know that this was going to happen. I did not know that Tahoma, if it's adding a plastic tool mesh to an entire scene that has animation, that it goes ahead and creates a sequence of meshes. I have literally, in 2 years plus of using OpenToonz, I've never seen it do that. Kind of cool, actually. Let's go with it. All right, so the next thing we need to do is create our skeleton, and our objective here is to simply create a simple skeleton that gives us the ability to animate this guy's arm, and then judiciously protect everything that we don't want to have getting moved around by the plastic at the bottom like this, just to, again, protect all this region so that when I move these nodes over here, we're not going to get some erroneous weird movement of these nodes over there. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and kind of overdo it, so that effectively protects those areas. So now when I move this around, like we'll go into the fast preview, you can see that we get a nice, really nice, that's exactly what I wanted. That's exactly what I wanted. So for me, the effect would give you more control of any changes in degree too, wouldn't it? I'm gonna ignore the Statue of Liberty comment. Yes, okay, it looks like the Statue of Liberty, but that's okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of block in very simple animation. I'm allowing, getting kind of back to Max's comment, I'm allowing Tahoma to do the tweening. In this case, just for fun, I'm going to extend this out like that. You know, and then actually maybe even go up one frame here. Okay. So let's see what it does. Yeah, it's perfect. Perfect. Now, one thing that is also interesting, as you guys can see, is even when I'm in the fast preview mode, now that I've gone into the rendered mode and back out of it, now the transparency on the shadows is preserved. Okay, I'll take it. No idea why. So things are a little hit and miss in that regard with Tahoma and OpenToonz. But anyway, what we're going to do is just keep forging ahead on that same basis. So I'm going to create a mesh for this guy. Again, it looks to me like it's creating a mesh for every single frame, even though nothing really changes. As you can see, because I kind of have my assets under control, the fact that the mesh changes over time really didn't affect the way the skeleton, you know, deformed it. So that it's all good. Yeah, about the Statue of Liberty, I assume is what you mean, Darren. So yeah, no harm done, buddy. No harm done. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to hit, we're going to be in build skeleton mode, and let's just kind of have a little fun here testing something. Here we can see the transparency. Here we see the transparency, and of course he's got the shadow effect on him. If we go up and out and go into rendered mode, okay, so now what I'm going to test here is if we go to this and then back to this and then back to this. Okay, there you go, guys. Look at what just happened. With these icons, if you look at it in rendered mode and then go back to the fast preview, the transparency that you want that's baked into the subscene is restored. So that's good, right? So if you bake transparency, as I did here, into the shadow layer, and then you jump back out and everything looks black, just toggle between the rendered view and the preview, and it looks like everything seems to, well, maybe not. Huh, that's interesting. It's like, okay, no, wait. Stop what I just said. What I just said was wrong. I'm sorry, I apologize. I was going like this, as if this is the fast preview mode. That's completely wrong. This is the sub-camera preview and has nothing to do with it. So why I'm seeing his shadows transparent but not his, I don't have a clue. Not a clue. So for now we're going to ignore that and not worry about it. Okay, so we need to build this guy's skeleton. So let's just do the usual routine here. In this case, I'm going to give him a slight latitude to potentially have his body bend a bit at the waist so that he can kind of, yeah, you know, kind of going like this maybe. We'll see. We'll see. All right, so if we're going to rock and roll with this guy, then we really want to just have a very simple skeleton. And the concept here is, and I'm going to add an extra node here so that he can kind of bend at the shoulder a little bit. Okay? Boom, 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 boom. And then, again, we probably want to put a couple extra nodes at these junction points where we don't want things to get deformed. That's just my usual practice, and I find it works really well. You can get into other aspects of the plastic tool like paint rigid, which theoretically lets you paint red or green to tell something whether it's going to deform or not. In my experience, it's just not that useful compared to the way I'm doing it, where I just add extra nodes to protect what I want to control. So this guy, I'm going to go ahead and add a global key, which means if I move something a little bit, what should happen is the entire skeleton is keyframed. Okay? And so again, per sort of anime convention, now what we expect to see is this keyframe, everything will be in the same position until we get to here, and now again we're going to allow sort of a couple frames of tweening. What I'm going to do actually is, I think I'm going to go ahead and keep this pretty simple. Now that would actually not be too bad if we go like that. So he's kind of like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Literally. We'll see how it goes. So I'm looking at the, yeah, and we still only have a 2-second delay in the live stream, which is pretty cool. Okay, so, hey, Golik, what about these taxes? Yeah, without crops, how can we pay? All right. Hey, Golik, what about these taxes? Yeah, without, how can we pay? Okay, not too shabby. Not too shabby, with the caveat that I think I want to take these two keys, Control C, and I think I want to repeat them once, and then have him land on this pose. Okay? And now we could go ahead and render this and cut it into the show just to kind of see how it feels without the background and all the rest. So why not? In fact, basically, I'm probably ready to quit anyway on this particular session. So according to YouTube, how long the heck have we been live streaming? 10:20, yeah, about 2 hours. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I want to check my render settings. I think they're already set up. Scene 583 render. Yep, save and render. Okay, and then we'll just, while that's rendering, I think because of all the plastic tool, it's going to take a little bit longer than usual to render. So I'm going to jump over here, and we'll go ahead and take that storyboard image out of the show. There's no reason for it to be in there. Project Media, and we're going to go to Scene 583. There it is. Has it rendered yet? Not according to... Oh, there it is. It looks like it's done rendering. So there's the sequence, 66 frames at our preferred 8 frames per second. And there's 583. We drag it into the show just so we can kind of see how the timing of it is harmonizing. And so Golik comes out there. We gather today to celebrate the marriage of Prince Vespar and... Hey, Golik, what about these taxes? Yeah, without crops, how can we pay? Not bad. I've got to take this and turn off resampling. The reason it ghosts as it's playing, you see some ghosting going on, that's because of the resampling. basically because the timeline is 24 frames per second, but the image sequence is 8 frames per second, Vegas is interpolating new frames in between. It's basically a really, really simple poor man's motion blur is really what it is. So I'm going to jump over here so you guys can see better what's going on. So actually I'll allow that to hold away from it. So you see the ghosting there? That ghosting isn't your YouTube connection or anything. That's actually in the edit. And there you can see a freeze frame of it. So that ghosting is essentially interpolated motion blur. That's almost never a good thing. I think I've had like 2 situations ever, like in 20 years, where the resampling has been useful. So, and one of them was in this show. Actually, it was in episode 1. There was one shot where I went ahead and just allowed the resampling to do what it does. Yeah, what about these taxes? Yeah, without crops, how can we pay? Cool. And then once that plays out, let's just get the timing here. And then it'll end there. So it's going to be with it's going to be how can we pay? And then it cuts right back to go like friends, please, please. The king has heard your complaints. That's actually kind of how Golet talks. Please. What is it? What is the dialogue? Golik's like, friends, I assure you, the king has heard your pleas. So what are you going to do about it? So that's what we have going on here. All right, so I am not going to do the background painting now. I'm going to actually go ahead and check out and move on to a couple other things. Tom, I'm so sorry that you showed up right when I'm finishing up, but good to see you. And I am going to go ahead and sign off. And as you guys know, there will be more later. And I don't know if I'm going to do the background on this shot on a live stream or not. But anyway, so thanks for everyone, to everyone for your suggestions. Max, good stuff. Darren, good stuff.